Tonight on The Buzz, we're looking at archiving, both hardware and software, starting with Tim Jones. He's the president and CTO of TOLIS Group. He's been involved with backup and archival planning and implementation since 1982, and with tape hardware design since 1987. Tonight, he explains what we must know to safely archive our projects. Next, Roger Mabon is the co-founder of MLogic, which designs and markets peripherals for desktop and portable computers, including Thunderbolt-based computer backup and docking hardware. Tonight, Roger explains LTO tape technology and what hardware you need to successfully archive your projects. Next, Dr. Mark Batchkis is the Business Development Manager for Archiware, which is a Munich-based developer of data management software for backup, synchronization, and archiving. Tonight, Mark looks at the software side of archiving and some options and ideas that you can use to protect your assets. All this, plus Tech Talk and a Buzz flashback. The Buzz starts now.
Digital Production Buzz is brought to you by Otherworld Computing at MacSales.com and by ImagineProducts.com, the workflow experts.
Since the dawn of digital filmmaking,
authoritative.
One show serves a worldwide network of media professionals.
Current.
Uniting industry experts,
Production.
filmmakers,
Post-production.
and content creators around the planet.
Distribution.
From the media capital of the world in Los Angeles, California, the Digital Production Buzz goes live now.
And welcome to the Digital Production Buzz, the world's longest-running podcast for the creative content industry, covering media production, post-production, and marketing around the world. Mike Horton and Randy Altman have the night off. Tonight we're focusing on archiving, hardware, software, and planning. Archiving is critical for the long-term protection of our media assets, media that all too often can't be reshot or recreated. But what planning is necessary? What hardware should we use, or even what software? Our goal tonight is to help provide answers to all of these questions. And before we start, I want to remind you to subscribe to our free weekly show newsletter at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Every issue, every week, gives you an inside look at the Buzz, quick links to all the different segments on the show, and curated articles of special interest to filmmakers. Best of all, every issue is free. I'll be back with Tim Jones right after this.
Still to come on The Buzz.
When you're working with media, one thing is essential. Your computer needs peak performance. However, when it comes to upgrading your Mac, there are so many different options to choose from that the process can be confusing. That's why Otherworld Computing carries the best upgrades that lets your computer performance and storage grow as your needs grow. Since 1988, OWC has become one of the most trusted names in quality hardware and comprehensive support to the worldwide computer industry. With an extensive online catalog of Mac, iPhone, and iPad enhancement products, as well as a dedicated team of knowledgeable experts providing first-rate tech support, OWC has everything you need to take your current system to the next level. Whether you need to maximize your system's memory, add blazing speed, or enhance reliability, look no further than the friendly experts at OWC. Learn more by visiting MacSales.com today. That's MacSales.com.
Tim Jones is the president and CTO of TOLIS Group in Scottsdale, Arizona. He's been involved with archive planning and implementation since 1982 and with tape hardware design since 1987. His company first released Brew, which is a software archiving product, in 1985 and a Mac version in 2003. Hello, Tim. Welcome.
Hi, Larry. How are everybody?
Tim, tonight we want to talk about archiving. So to help us set the stage, how would you define the difference between a backup and an archive?
That is something that comes from a number of different perspectives depending on the type of industry that you're in. In this industry, the two topics are very similar in that most people that are backing up assets, they're looking at storing them or keeping them for some long period. They're not just looking at creating something that they can get back in the event of an oops. But in general terms, a backup is something that you do daily so that in the event that something untoward happens, somebody deletes a file, somebody changes a file that they shouldn't have changed, you can restore that file tomorrow. Or if you're doing full system environment backups, you're going to be able to cover systems that fail. An archive, on the other hand, is you're creating copies of data that are going to be stored and kept for long periods of time, whether this is for legal reasons, such as medical research or governmental requirements, or is simply that you're looking forward to being able to put out that 25th anniversary director's cut of that latest new blockbuster. That's what archival is about. So while the two processes tend to do the same thing initially, the purpose of the result is what differs the two.
I was just reading your bio. You first got involved in the archiving industry back in the early 80s. What was it that caught your attention and got you hooked on this?
I was in the Coast Guard at the time, and I got transferred up to Boston, Massachusetts headquarters. And basically, we had a different type of computer on every desk in the office. There were IBM PCs and Wangs and Wang OISs and IBM terminals and IBM mainframes and Wang mainframes. And I got to talking to the guys that were friends of mine in Washington, and we needed to come up with a way to stop that insanity and standardize everything. And one of the first tasks that we had to come up with was a way to actually back up all of that data that was on these disparate systems so that we could bring it together when we finally decided on how we were going to do it. And that's when I started looking at the various options for backup. Of course, back then, the only thing really available was reel-to-reel tape. And if anybody remembers the old 2400 Blackwatch tapes, you couldn't get much better than that. They held anywhere from 34 to 60 megabytes of data, and they backed it up at a whopping 112 kilobytes per second. And you didn't even have programs like TAR or CPIO, let alone some of the newer stuff. You had basically bit dumps, and you dumped the data onto tape as if it were a file system, and then you just kind of kept your fingers crossed that when time came, you could get it back. It was an interesting time to be involved in this side of the industry.
I remember those days. My floppy disk held 92 kilobytes of information. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven because the rest of them held like 40 to 60. So I know exactly what you mean about limited storage capacity. But as you look at it over time, how has archiving hardware changed over the last several years, the last couple decades, actually? Is it just faster and deeper, or is there more to it than that?
Bigger, faster, but mainly it's more reliable. When you hear people talk about tapes and tape failures from back in the quarter-inch cartridge days, there was not a lot that we could do computer-wise inside of the tape drive. All of the logic was on the computing platform. The tape drive was basically just an analog tape recorder that recorded ones and zeros instead of sweeping sine waves. So we tried to come up with ways to put error correction code in, and that eventually grew into it. There was block redundancy in some of the early drives. I mean, the things that we did to try and make tape reliable back then, it was really reaching. And at the time, it was the edge of bleeding. And we bled a lot.
So what tape format should we consider for archiving today?
Well, today there are two primaries that we recommend. The one that everybody knows is, of course, LTO, the LTO technology. The second option, which is primarily seen in the very big system environments, is Oracle/Sun/StorageTek's T10000 family. They are both rock solid platforms. But if you look at what the average cost of an LTO6 standalone drive today is going to run you around $3,000 to $4,000, and just the drive mechanism before you put it in the chassis that it has to go into with the T10000 starts at around $25K.
Well, LTO drives right now are made by two companies, IBM and HP. Why should we care about who packages the drive into a chassis and sells it to the end user? Because the mechanism's the same.
Well, it all comes down to service and support. Whether you're buying an IBM chassis, an HP chassis, Quantum or Storage Tech, Storage Tech uses IBM for the LTO, or any of those guys, Qualstar, any of those, TOLIS Group for that matter, we're all using the same hardware, the same technology in the hardware. It all boils down to service and support, so that when, if you're working on a Linux box and you're using Linux tools, you want to call a company that when you tell them you're using Linux, they're not going to shuffle you off or tell you, well, can you connect it to a Windows box? And the same thing applies for the Mac platform, which is even more problematic for some folks, in that when you call some of those support teams for some of those larger organizations, they really don't have the staff on hand or the knowledge base to support you on a Mac platform. So when you're looking for that solution, regardless of what it is, whether it's a standalone device or a huge room-filling silo, you want to make sure that the company you're dealing with is going to support you in your environment without having to send you all over town to find someone who knows your environment and their environment to help you out.
There's multiple levels of LTO, starting with LTO1, which is no longer manufactured. The ones that are out now are LTO5 and LTO6 and LTO7. How do we decide which of those three to buy?
Well, actually, it's a little more wide-ranging than that. We can still get LTO3 and LTO4 drives as well. In fact, we sell a lot of LTO4 drives to smaller shops that are doing things like music production and general business office type stuff. But from the perspective of the larger capacities that we need in this industry, the 5, 6, and 7 are what you're going to be looking at. The 6, I say, and a number of people that are in my realm agree with me, the LTO6 is going to be the sweet spot for still another 2 to 3 years. LTO7 is available in standalone. We expect to see LTO7 being demonstrated at NAB, but don't expect to walk into NAB and walk up to a vendor and say, I want to take 3 of those home. Because more than likely, we're not going to see shipping until the May-June timeframe on the automation devices. Now, you can buy a standalone drive right now, but from an automation perspective, we're looking at after NAB for availability.
Now, automation would be like a library where there's multiple drives ganged together?
Well, I'm terribly sorry. It's less multiple drives than it is the ability to automate the tape changing mechanism. So you may have a library that has 24 tape slots, but it only has a single tape drive. And the reason for that is because you want to be able to start a job. A perfect example with Fast and Furious 7, this took us over 209 LTO6 tapes to complete the backup of business, editorial, VFX, previs, and finals. And then I guess, wait a minute, because we did the raws, the daily stuff, we did that separately, and that was another 53 tapes. So you can see how if somebody has to sit there and go through 261 tapes manually, that becomes a problem. So automation is what we refer to the robotics, that when you fill a tape, it'll automatically eject that tape, grab another tape, and put it in for you without you having to manually have what we call a tape monkey swapping the tapes.
We've looked at hardware and how it's changed over the last 2 decades. How has archiving software changed?
There are still 3 primary flavors in the big field out there. You've got, in the Windows world, most of the component players utilize a format that's called MTF. It's now Microsoft Tape Format, but back in 1987, when I went to work for Archive Corporation, it was called Mainstream Tape Format, and it was created when we were trying to get 20 megabytes of tape onto a 20 megabyte, or 20 megabytes of data onto a 20 megabyte tape. Since then, you've also had, coming out of the Unix world, you had the tar format, which most people are very familiar with. There's also another Unix format that's called CPIO, which simply is Unix linguise for copy in out. And then newer technologies, of course, Brew being one of those, coming around in 1885, came into that realm. We had folks such as Retrospect. Of course, they had their own format. And now lately, you've got the LTFS format that's come out. So in reality, a lot of the software side of things have not changed that drastically. More the hardware to support that software format, because the tar format, the specification for tar that exists today, can read the same tar that was created years ago. The problem is with tar, you've got so many offshoots. There's a number of issues there where tar is not tar. But from the most point, tar has stayed pretty much stable throughout time. With Brew, it's the same type of thing. We started in '85, and the tapes that were made, the earliest tapes we still have in our lab were made in '88. The Brew that we have today will totally read and restore those. And other platforms are doing the same type of thing. Retrospect never was one of that. I mean, Retrospect had the issue whereas as you upgraded, your tapes were no longer compatible, because they would find new ways to do things, but unfortunately those new ways were incompatible with the old ways. LTFS has witnessed that through the 5 generations of LTFS that have come out, whereas some of the newer formats can't read the older formats, depending on which platform it was. They've started to sort of sort that out, and now as we start to see LTFS 3 come about supporting LTO 7, we're seeing a little bit more stability in that environment than previously. But for the most part, the software changes have been more on the user side, how the user perceives what they are doing, more than moving the bits from the disk drive to the tape.
Now, you've mentioned Brew. How would you describe Brew?
We started with Brew in '85 due to some serious failings at the NASA satellite division at Motorola Satellite Systems Group. Fred Fish, who has passed on now, Fred and I worked on this a long time, trying to come up with a way to make up for the shortfalls of TAR. What we found was that TAR the application, Motorola being a source code licensee, TAR the application, it was a good little application, but TAR the format had holes in it that you could drive a Caterpillar truck through. So what we tried to do back then was come up with a way to create an archival container that, regardless of what you were writing to, whether it was tape or disk, or back then, of course, you would use things like Archie and Gopher to move files from one system to another. The idea was the container had to be rock solid. It had to be something that you could look at in 2 hours, 2 weeks, or 2 years and say, yes, my data is still good. So we worked on a number of different things. We tried things like writing triplicate blocks. We came up with our own error correction code mechanism, but of course that was coming around about the time where tape drives were starting to add read after write verification. And so we stopped that. But one thing that we did find was that in the data stream from the disk to the tape, there were a number of places where bits could become non-bits. And because of that, we figured that the best thing that we could do was put a checksum on every bit of data that we read from the file system as soon as we read it. So by applying that checksum at a 2K level of granularity, meaning every 2K of data that we read off of the disk, and writing that checksum into the header for that 2K of data as it was packed into the archival container, we could then determine from the tape whether it was immediately after the backup or 10 years down the road. We could look at that tape and say, the data on this tape is still 100% valid. That was the fault that we saw in TAR and CPIO. They did nothing to give you the ability to verify. In fact, the only operation you had that you could verify one of those older formats was to restore the data to another platform and then compare the original file with the restored file to see if that worked. And that just really messed up with backup windows. And even back when we were talking about hundreds of megabytes of data, the backup windows weren't that huge. So
now,
we
Tim,
had to do
what
things
makes Brew unique? Because there's a lot of different archiving applications that are out there.
Well, simply that verification mechanism, that the ability for you to look at a brew tape in 2 years on a completely different platform and say the data on this tape is 100% valid. That is the big differentiator. Well, that and the fact that we also know how to talk directly to the tape drives. So while Brew is moving data between your file system, your computer, and the tape drive, Brew in the command channel is actually talking to the hardware, asking the hardware continually, are you okay? Did that work? Are you okay? Did that work? And because of the dual channel nature, the way we talk to the tape device, we've come up with a way to do that that does not forfeit performance in the I/O stream. So if you've got an LTO6 and you're using Brew with a Mac Pro, you're going to get 170, 180 megabytes per second because of the way we talk to the device. This is also how we recognize bad devices when other applications don't.
Last question before we wrap up. What key points do producers need to keep in mind as they're getting ready to archive their media? Do they just simply grab a tape and start dubbing stuff over, or do they need to think about something first?
Well, there are two forms. There is a dailies, and then there is the long term. For the dailies, we live by one rule: back up everything. There is no excuse for, oh, we lost that to the cutting room floor. That's a line that should never be heard ever again in this industry. The other thing is, for the long range stuff, you need to be aware of what you're backing up. Don't just throw it all onto a tape, whether you're using Brew or Tar or one of the Windows platforms, or whether you're using an LTFS-based solution. You don't want to just throw it onto tape, because while that makes it quick now, in 5 years, how do you figure out what part of all of that you need back to do what you need to do? So we strongly urge our customers to examine their editing workflow and their ingest workflow and come up with a backup workflow that mirrors that. So that when you've got somebody, you've brought your colors team in, they're working on the color work, back that up. You've got your VFX guys working on all the VFX stuff, back that up. You've got your editors in there chopping and chopping and chopping, and you're getting a good cut, back that up. Tape is inexpensive. Relative to the cost of a production, tape hardware is inexpensive. But what would it cost you if you needed to recreate that entire scene and you happen to have had just the perfect attitude from your actors, just the perfect sky for your lighting, and just the perfect level of drizzle so you're not having to hire a rain scaffold? You know, that's going to cost a lot more than that tape drive cost you.
And Tim, for people that want more information, where can they go on the web?
Lots of places. But for us, it's www.tolisgroup.com. That's TOLISGROUP.com. And we can set you up with everything from simple tape storage to complete solutions involving digital asset management, middleware, and end-to-end tape and disk.
And that's all one word, TOLISGROUP. Tim Jones is the president and CTO of TOLIS Group. Tim, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
My pleasure.
Still to come on the Buzz.
Imagine Products has been specializing in workflow applications for over 25 years. They started with Executive Producer back in 1991, an all-in-one logging and offline editing tool. In 2006, ImageMine was used in the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics, and ShotPut Pro was released. Today, there are more than 30,000 ShotPut Pro users worldwide. Pre-roll post for Macintosh was released in 2012. This is an LTFS archiving application compatible with any LTO tape drive, as well as Sony's ODA. Pre-roll post for Windows was released at the end of 2015. It's the only LTFS archiving application of its kind for less than $500. Imagine Products has 3 simple goals for its software: make it powerful, make it easy to use, and make it affordable. It's easy to see why Imagine Products has been successful for 25 years. Imagine what comes next. Visit imagineproducts.com to download a demo.
Roger Mabon is the co-founder of MLogic, which designs and markets peripheral products for desktop and portable computers, including computer backup and docking solutions using the high-speed Thunderbolt interface. Prior to MLogic, Roger founded G Technology, which is known to media folks around the world. Hello, Roger. Welcome.
Hi, Larry. Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. I want to start with some basics. How would you describe MLogic?
Well, MLogic is focused on, as you mentioned, storage peripherals using the Thunderbolt interface. So we do have some docking solutions, some Thunderbolt expansion chassis that allow you to put cards into boxes and then hook them up to Macs, which of course only have Thunderbolt ports. But our main product line at this point is archiving solutions. So Thunderbolt-enabled LTO systems, specifically designed to archive content from hard disk-based solutions.
Well, there's been a lot of companies that make peripherals. Why did you decide to start MLogic?
Well, I mean, as the founder of G-Tech, I've sold a lot of hard drives in my day. And my mission now is to actually make sure that some of that content that is residing on those drives, sitting on the shelves in various post houses and whatnot that I see all over the place, actually gets put somewhere that's going to protect that content for the long term. So having content sitting on a hard drive on a shelf is not an archive strategy. It's actually...
Why not? I want to get to that. Why can't we just leave our hard drives on a shelf?
Well, hard drives are not designed to sit around powered off. So having that hard drive sitting on the shelf is like bread molding, basically. I mean, you'll be lucky to get that data back in, say, 5 or 6 years. People do it a lot. Sometimes archiving is an afterthought. We're here to hopefully change that with our really simple and easy to use LTO solutions.
Well, I want to talk, there's a difference between making a backup and making an archive. How would you differentiate between the two?
Well, backup is just backing up your data for use in the near future. I mean, you're backing up your files that may be using on a daily basis, maybe, whatever the content might be. Archive is different. That is your actual archive for the long term. Think of it as like the negative. So you complete your project, you remove it off of the spinning disk system that you use to actually edit and make the whatever you're doing. And then you actually move that content from the spinning drives to the tape system. And you do this because an LTO7 tape, which is about that size, this tape, which can now hold 6 terabytes of capacity at about $100 of cost, can sit on a shelf for 30 plus years. So that's 5 or 6 times the longevity of a spinning drive sitting around.
Well, I want to come back to that because the 30 years is somewhat of a misnomer, but before we talk about the tape, there's also an optical technology that Sony is talking about. I think it's called the ODA architecture. What's that compared to LTO tape?
Well, I don't know much about ODA. I've certainly heard about it. It's an optical disc format. I think it's based on Blu-ray type technology. As far as I recall, they have multi-discs and some kind of little cartridge that holds, I think, 100 gigabytes per disc. And they have numerous discs in a little cartridge. And the idea is similar to tape. That would be a long-term archiving strategy, just using a different technology. As far as I know, it's quite expensive and limited in terms of capacity at this point.
Well, let's switch back to tape, which is where you and your products are focused. LTO tapes have different levels. I've heard of LTO 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. What's the difference between the different levels?
So that's right. So LTO has been around since generation 1. It's been many, many years. And now we're at generation 7, which is the big news. It's recently introduced. So LTO 5, we'll start there, because that's when something called LTFS came out, which is an IBM software that enables a tape to be mounted as if it were a hard drive. So if you're on a Mac and you're using LTFS software, you actually see the tape pop up on your desktop. Now this is great because that enables the drag and drop functionality, which is the same paradigm as using a disk. You can just drag content to and from, which is wonderful. It makes a tape much more easy to handle and use. And that was started in generation 5. Then of course we moved on to 6, and now today we're at generation 7.
So is the difference only in numbers, or is there a performance or storage difference between them?
Yeah. So we'll just talk about LTO6. LTO6 has a tape cartridge that looks similar to this that handles 2.5 terabytes of native storage capacity. Okay. An LTO6 tape drive's maximum data transfer rate is 160 megabytes per second. So it's quite fast. But moving on to LTO7, which is the tape I'm holding here, this tape now has a native capacity of 6 terabytes. And the performance is now 300 megabytes per second. So significantly faster than a single spinning drive, which is great because that means the backup takes that much less time because we're now doing 300 megabytes per second transfers.
Can someone still buy LTO6, or is everything LTO7?
No, LTO6 is widely available. Our M-Tape solutions, we sell tons of LTO6. We started selling LTO7 at the beginning of this year, but both are available. But interestingly enough, what we're finding is that most people are opting for our LTO7 devices. They're slightly more expensive, but they do have the higher capacity, the higher speeds that I mentioned. The nice thing is that an LTO7 drive can read and write to an LTO6 tape. Okay, so the LTO6 tapes are very affordable, about $25 for 2.5 terabytes. So what we're seeing, like I said, is people are opting for the 7 hardware and potentially using 6 tapes because they're cheaper than the 7s, which go for about $130.
Do they both have the same longevity and resistance to damage? Is there anything different between LTO6 and LTO7 aside from speed and capacity?
No, in terms of longevity, it's identical. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned that I did want to come back to is the fact that LTO7 or 6 tapes have a life of about 30 to 35 years. While that's true physically, the format itself changes about every 18 months. So can we just take an LTO6 tape, put it on the shelf, and come back to it 30 years and be able to play it? Or do we need to look at it more as an active archiving system where we're going to have to change our tapes every couple of formats as the tape drives change?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the standard. You do want to migrate to this, every 4 or 5 years when the next generation might come out, or the generation after the next one. So, I mean, if you're on a 5 now, it's probably time to start thinking about moving to 7. That would be a very good thing to do. But one nice thing, again, is this LTFS software, which is an absolute industry standard. So I can make an LTFS tape in one of our M-Tape units, and then I can take it to any system that's LTFS compatible, be it a Mac, Windows, or a Linux machine, and I can still use that tape, which is really nice. The interchange in that regard is fantastic.
One of the things I've heard about LTFS is that when it's on a Mac, the Mac Finder is not tape-friendly, so that whenever it opens a folder on the Mac, the Finder needs to record a small hidden file, which means there's a lot of tape shuffling back and forth. Are we better off working with LTFS natively on a Mac, or are we better off working with software which is designed for archiving?
Yeah, so it's a very, very good question, one that I get asked a lot. So when we sell our system, we do have a utility that will mount the tape as if it were a drive, which absolutely enables drag and drop functionality. But there are some limitations, like you mentioned, especially with the Finder and Spotlight in Mac OS. So we do highly recommend that people look at third-party software packages to actually do the archiving. And these packages make the process seamless. They have a lot of nice features. The biggest ones are verification. Obviously, when you take your source content and you put it to an LTO tape, you want to be 100% sure that what is now residing on the tape is 100% the same as the source. So these packages do these verifications, which is really nice. They also index the footage, so when you need to go back and retrieve the footage, it simplifies everything enormously. So yes. We recommend packages from Imagine Products. One's called Pre-Roll Post. There's a company called Yoyata, which makes Yoyata ID LTFS software. We also work with companies like Brew and from TOLIS, and certainly Archiware.
We've talked with the folks at Imagine Products on a recent show, and we just finished chatting with Tim Smith over at TOLIS Group. And Archiware will be on in the next segment, so we'll be learning a lot about this.
Very good.
LTO drives are made by two companies. They're made by IBM and they're made by HP. Given the fact that there's only two manufacturers and lots of people packaging the drives, like MLogic, does the brand that makes that total package make a difference, or are we really just sort of shopping based on price?
Yeah, so we use IBM mechanisms internal to our products. Now, what we've done is we've taken these industry standard drives and packaged them in a way that allows you to attach them via the Thunderbolt connection on any Thunderbolt-enabled computer. That's our secret sauce, if you will. Taking these native SAS tape drives and converting the connection to Thunderbolt, which just makes everything extremely simple, especially on Mac, which all Macs have Thunderbolt connections. So that's what we've done. And we're actually the only Thunderbolt certified LTO, meaning Apple and Intel have certified this device. So that's basically what we do.
Well, let's talk about the device itself. What is it, and what does it cost? And when we're buying it, what are we buying?
Okay, so there's different flavors now because we're supporting both LTO 6 and LTO 7 technology. So our desktop M-tape unit with LTO 6 has a retail price of $35.99. And what you get with that is you get the desktop enclosure, obviously including the LTO 6 tape drive inside, dual Thunderbolt ports, comes with a Thunderbolt cable, and it comes with one piece of LTO 6 media and a cleaning cartridge. Okay? So $35.99 list. The M-tape LTO 7 version is $51.99 list price, so slightly more expensive, but again, twice the capacity, basically twice the speed. And again, comes with everything you need to just basically plug it in and get going.
And both these units are called what? What's the name?
They're called the MLogic M-tape.
Now, you've also got a rack-mounted version. Is that also Thunderbolt specific?
Yes, that's correct. So we have another product we call the M-Rack, and the M-Rack is a 1U device, rack mountable, that contains 1 or 2 LTO drives. So some people opt to get two drives in this rack because it enables them with software, such as some of the software I mentioned prior, to simultaneously write to 2 LTO tape cartridges for the ultimate in security. So you have a safety copy and another copy that you can put somewhere else. It's a nice feature.
What strategy should people have when they're archiving? What process should they go through?
In terms of, basically what happens today, obviously we have these cameras that have these SSDs basically on them. That's our film, basically, at this point. So what people do is they take these cartridges, right? They offload them via some type of dock, and they typically offload them to spinning drives, right? So that's where you get your edit done. You do everything in color, whatever you might need to do. You finish your project, and then you offload to tape for the actual archive. So once the project is finished, you archive the tape. Now, that said, people are also archiving on set because these cartridges that come off the cameras are, in fact, your negative. They're expensive. You want to reuse them. So the nice thing about our M-tape is it's a portable little device that you can bring on set, and you can actually do the archive in the field. And then you can recycle these cards for your camera, but knowing that you have that on here so that you're okay with erasing that actual footage right off those camera cards because you know it's on LTO where it's the safest possible place to put your media.
Should we have more than one copy of our archive?
Yes. I mean, look, the reality is, I think I mentioned this before, archiving seems to be an afterthought. We realize this. We're trying to make this is easy and affordable, so it's maybe not so much of an afterthought. But the fact is, it is an afterthought, and people are putting their stuff on hard drives. And once you lose something, you start to think about the archive strategy, right? But yes, it's good to have stuff that you're going to use in the short term sitting on hard drives. You certainly have to put it here. This is your negative, basically. And, we talk about the cloud. The cloud is also an interesting place to put content. But if you're generating these massive amounts of 4K data that we see nowadays, the cloud can get very, very expensive. Whereas for $100, I can put my 6 terabytes right here. and I have my hands on it, and I know it's going to be around for a long time.
And Roger, where can people go on the web to learn more about M-Tape and M-Rack?
Sure, it's www.mlogic.com.
And Roger Mabon is one of the co-founders of MLogic. And Roger, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks very much.
Still to come on the Buzz. Welcome to Tech Talk.
Let's do something really cool. Let's say that we had some audio recorded on set and it was noisy. We needed to re-record it, so we've got an ADR session. We've got our on-set audio, and we need to reconcile the ADR audio with the on-set audio. And for those of you who have ever done ADR work, you know that you want to have somebody else do it because it's just painful. Audition makes it easy. Watch this. Let's go up to here and say close all. I'm not going to save any changes because I want to come back to where I left off. And let's go to File. Let's open up a recent project, which is Speech Align. Here is the original on-set audio in the track called On-Set.
One of our key audio challenges is getting the same talent.
Okay, then I went and I re-recorded it because I needed to have a richer sound.
One of our key audio challenges is getting the same talent.
Now, if you've ever worked with on-set audio, it's never as good as what we just listened to. There's noise and clanking and goodness knows what all. The gremlins conspire to make on-set audio as bad as it possibly can be. So now I've got to reconcile these two, but if I play these two clips together, here's the problem.
One of our key audio challenges is getting the same talent recorded on different...
They don't sync. So now I've got to adjust on a syllable-by-syllable basis to take this ADR and get it to lip sync with the on-set audio, which, as you can imagine, is not for the faint of heart nor somebody that's in a hurry. This is a painstaking process. But watch what Audition does. I'm going to select these two clips here. Then I go up to the clip menu and go to Automatic Speech Alignment. I want to align my reference. My on-set clip is called Mic 2. We can see the name of the clip there. It's in the track where I'm putting all of my on-set audio, and I want to move around the clip called Mic 1. You can see the clip header there. I want to have it be really tightly aligned. The default is balanced alignment and stretching, but I want to have real tight alignment because it's going to stretch the clip, speed it up or slow it down without changing the pitch if I ask it to. And I'm going to have it add a new track, click OK. That quickly, it's aligned it. Now look at the header. I've got one that's Mic 2, one that's Mic 1. My aligned track has been Mic 1 voiceover aligned. It's in the middle. Let's mute Mic 1. Let's listen to the source clip, which is here, with the aligned clip, and see how tightly aligned they are.
One of our key audio challenges is getting the same talent,
which is pretty darn amazing,
recorded on different days using different mics to sound the same.
Now, these clips didn't even start at the same time. Yeah, they were in the ballpark, but we heard before they weren't perfectly aligned. Now, let's take a listen to the aligned clip and see what it sounds like.
One of our key audio challenges is getting the same talent recorded on different days using different mics to sound the same.
Now, the reason I chose this option is I wanted to get the alignment really tight. Let me just undo this. Select both clips. What I would do in real life is a slightly different setting. Clip, go to Automatic Speech Alignment, and I would change this to Balanced Alignment and Stretching because I end up with a higher quality result. Click OK. Look for the clip that's got aligned in the title. And now when I solo this and play it.
One of our key audio challenges is getting the same talent recorded on different days.
Which is just amazing. If you've ever spent days, even weeks, trying to get ADR to work with your project, this can get you so close so quickly that all you have to do is spend time with the exceptions, not spend time with the vast majority, which can be automatically aligned using Audition. Dr. Mark Botchkis is the Business Development Manager for ArchiWare, which is a Munich-based developer for data management software for backup, synchronization, and archiving. Mark's background includes archiving, media informatics, and data management. Hello, Mark. Welcome.
Hello, Larry. Thank you for having me again.
It's my pleasure. You know, I was just thinking that getting started in data management and archiving is not a normal switch coming out of school. What got you interested in this in the first place?
I actually did a lot of data management and media informatics at the university, where I was for a very long time. And so the switch came natural when, let's say, the road in academics was getting too narrow.
How would you describe ArchiWare?
We are a group of friends, really, working together very closely, like in a big family or something. Attention to detail, that's the important thing.
ArchiWare is a middle-sized company, but what part of data management do you focus on?
So it's from cloning data for data availability, time-critical stuff. Then we have a routine backup product for workstations and for servers, so two different products. And then we have an archive product for long-term archiving. But they all scale from the very small installation, might be a Mac Mini and a single tape drive, to medium and very large installations, actually really large enterprises.
Who would be a typical customer?
A typical customer, so where we have really dozens or maybe even hundreds of, are post-production companies ranging from 5 to 50 persons, something like that. That's our main range. But having that said, we have, as I said, 1-2 people companies and up to really nationwide or global companies as well.
Would you say that you're focusing more on the small customer market, the middle customer market, or the enterprise market? Where's the focus of the company?
It's the mid-sized market and the small enterprise market. So in the enterprises, we often have island installations. So there might be a global global Fortune 500 company that everybody knows, and they are our customers, but we are not doing the main data management solution. We do something for Department A and Department D and Department F, and that's our strength because we are more accessible, easier to use, and easier to maintain than the very big solutions that they use globally.
Well, there's lots of different archiving software, and you're not the least expensive in the market. There's stuff that's free and stuff that's nearly free, and Carbon Copy Cloner is probably the most famous of all of these. And there's archiving software. What is it that's unique about you? Why should somebody invest the money necessary to get ArchiWare on their system?
First, it's the flexibility. So the platform choice is completely up to you. We are platform agnostic. We support Mac, Windows, Linux, Solaris, and FreeBSD. So people can build their own appliances. People can have very high performance servers running with us. And people can choose to move from one platform to the other very easily. You copy one configuration directory over from your, let's say, Windows server to the Linux server that you choose as the next platform, and then you're good to go, and everything is already up and running. And that makes it a very attractive platform for people who are in charge of mid to larger end installations, not just a company who has 2 servers, but somebody who has 10, 15, 20, 50 servers to take care of, where this is a reasonable perspective. They might change platform, they might have to move to another platform, stuff like that. So this versatility is important. And then performance-wise, there's a huge gap between those free tools and us. If you compare them, if you do identical jobs with them and with us, it's sometimes a factor of 10 that we are faster.
I want to take a step back, because throughout today's show, we've been looking at the process of archiving from a hardware point of view and a software point of view. But there's actually a process to archiving. What should media creators think about when they're getting ready to archive their projects? What codecs should they use? How many archives should they keep, and how do you deal with the future?
So when you're planning to build an archive, you should think about the use case 5 years down the road, because there might nobody be around that remembers anything of today's production. So the environment, who was involved, the codecs, all those machinery used, whatever it is. In 5 years from now, maybe everybody has changed, but they still would have to access the material and find it. So how do you find it? You need metadata. So you need a metadata schema, and that's not an IT topic, but that's an organizational topic. So you have to work out on that. What descriptions do you need? What methodology? What categories can you cut down on specific vocabulary to make that consistent? This is very important because this is the key to the archive later on. So the metadata schema. And then the use case, and thinking about the future. Who would it be? What role would the person have? Would it be an editor? Would it be a producer? Would it be whatever? And what would this person know about the stuff that is already recorded and captured in the archive? And from there, you work your way basically backwards and think about what would we have to put in today so that it makes sense 10 years from now to work with, and how can you find stuff? So this. Having that said, you always have to make a choice, and there's kind of a balance that you have to strike for your individual production environment on codecs, on machinery, on operating system level that you have to basically maintain and kind of put on the side, even if you're not working with it anymore, to have access to tools that might be essential to reconstruct a production from today in 5 years, because the operating system in 5 years might not support the plug-in, the specific little tool that did some tweaking, the whatever it might be, the recalculation of something. And so you would have to be very careful and document all the surroundings of your production to be able to track them down and be able to kind of conserve them for the future, the essential parts at least. So I would suggest to media companies to always keep old machines as they are in some basement or something available, because they might need them in some years. And then you can look at the most future-proof codecs that might make sense to choose right now to put your stuff in. But there are always specifics, and there are always details hidden in there that will catch you later on if you're not very detailed and document very well. So documenting everything good and in a most generic form, just in a text file or whatever it might be, is an essential part, I think.
Do we need to transcode our media, for instance, convert MP3s to AIFs or WAVs, or convert our video into a more future-proof codec, or are codecs going to be around for a while without changes? What would you advise?
I would always use the most quality that you can get, the highest quality codec. So MP3 is not really the best one. So you record it as AIF or something and keep it that way. And then you just downsample it for needs of a production for web videos or stuff like that. So keep the original files in a native condition and keep track of everything that's necessary to access them. So there might be plugins or there might be tools that allow you to open your raw footage or your whatever native recording formats. But those are the native formats, not transcoded or anything, would be the things that I would archive and strongly suggest to archive, so that you can always back to the source format and transcode from there, even if you need it, I don't know, in 5 years or something.
So the key is to keep all of our camera native, our original formats, and make sure that those get retained. And then I would also suggest keeping the final output of your show where at least you've got the finished version, but not necessarily keep all the interim work versions, is what I'm hearing from you. Is that true?
That's true, definitely. So the output is definitely important. I mean, you want to, reference to it. You gave it to your customer. The customer might come back and ask you for it in the original format. They sometimes lose track of what I hear from production companies, lose track of what was the last actual edit that we actually used. So you should be able to reference that to them. And and the highest quality original native format that you can keep, and as much as you can keep. So if it's really possible to keep everything, it makes sense in the long run. I heard that many, many times, even if it's a burden. Of course, it's a burden because it's a lot of storage. But for most people in most situations, it makes sense to keep everything around. There might always be a situation repurposing, doing new edit, doing something for the typical case. A customer comes back and says, now we have our 15th anniversary, or now we have our 20th anniversary. Can you do something from, whatever? And if you don't have anything additionally, that's not good. You always want to do a little variation of something that you gave to them as their last, whatever it was.
One of the things that you guys do is back off to tape so that we're not just storing it on hard disks, but storing it to tape. What tape formats do you recommend?
Basically, since we came from tape 20 years ago or something and supported everything, AIT, DLT, and all those crazy formats that are no longer really around. I mean, they're still used by some people, but only in legacy installations. Right now it's LTO tape, so it's about LTO 5, 6, and now 7 since end of last year. And LTO tape is the only format that's accessible to us, to all of us, the basic industry usage. It's LTO tape, LTO 5, 6, 7 generation-wise. LTO 7 just came out with a big performance improvement, so they have now a performance of 300 megabytes a second native throughput, which is impressive, really, and 6 terabyte per cartridge native capacity, which makes it incredibly compact as a format. So you have this 3.5 by 3.5 inch cartridge that holds 6 terabyte of your footage, which is really impressive. They are still a bit costly, but the prices will, of course, over the time come down.
It seems to me, though, one of the things I've learned as I learn more about archiving is that we can't just simply lay it off to tape and forget about it. We've got to actively manage our assets on every 5 or 6 years, copy them from the old format to the new format. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, that's true. Every technology needs migration sooner or later. With disks, we don't notice it that much because, of course, we buy a new MacBook or we buy a new Mac Pro or something, but that's also a migration of the storage technology. We might have those hybrid SSD disk combinations now in there, so it is a migration of technology, or we might have only SSD storage now, so it is again a migration of the technology. So this happens more invisibly, though we do it in front of our eyes. And with a long-term archiving, when you reach out and have more than 2 generations to the most recent LTO generation, then it's a good time actually to start about thinking migration. But having that said, they guarantee for 10-year repurchasing. So you can always, for 10 years, you can still buy, I think, LTO 3 drives, which is really old stuff. So LTO 2 was taken out of this repurchasing guarantee recently, I think last year. So LTO 3 is still available as a drive and, of course, the media. So the consortium takes good care, the LTO consortium, all the members, that stuff is available for a very long time. But still, of course, if you're now on LTO 3, it is high time to migrate to LTO 5 or 6.
As we wrap up, what top 1, 2, or 3 things should people keep in mind as they're planning their own archives? What's the key take-home that you want people to remember?
Take time for planning and involve all people that even remotely are in touch with it. So all the stages of the production. There might be things that producer assistants, or I don't know, involve all the people, because everybody in the end can contribute a little bit, and the planning process is so crucial. It's hard to re-implement something that you forgot 2 or 3 years ago. So there might be a lot of, whatever, relabeling or re-tagging of media, and that's a waste of time. You can really solve all of that when you have a thorough planning process, get everyone on the same page on one table, discuss that for a number of weeks or months, and put it on paper, not just install it immediately on a system or implement it. Shuffle that around on paper. That's a good perspective to have enough distance to reflect on it and to see, is this really what we want? Is everything in there? Is everybody satisfied? Would that work in the future? Stuff like that. And then start implementing, because implementing, like with us, is a 5-minute process. You install it and you say, okay, I need 10 metadata fields. So each field takes you half a minute to implement, and that's it. So, and then you start archiving. So that's not the big thing. The big thing is the planning, thinking, and making it future-proof.
Mark, where can people go on the web to learn more about ArchiWare and your products?
Our website is www.archiware.com. So like archive and software, archiware.com. And you see everything about our products, P5 Synchronize, P5 Backup, P5 Backup to Go, and P5 Archive. And there is a new product, the P5 Archive app, which has a Mac OS X Finder integration. So it's a one-click archive. And restore is the same, so there's no additional interface. You do it from the Finder, and that's the newest product we just introduced.
Congratulations. Dr. Mark Botchkis is the Business Development Manager for ArchiWare. And Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Larry, for having me.
It's time for a BuZZ flashback, 5 years ago today.
I fell in love with a woman from Germany, and I moved to Germany in 2010. When I got here, I was missing radio, and I wanted to do something I've never done before. I wanted to do a show that has no restrictions. I decided that I would learn how to record, which I had never done before. I had only done live radio shows my entire career.
This was a BuZZ flashback.
It's been interesting concentrating on archiving and hearing 3 different voices talking about the same thing. And as I think back on it, I realize the importance of planning, that we need to think about what we want to preserve. We want to use LTO6 or later tape hardware, not because LTO4 or 5 doesn't work, but simply because we want to make sure that the files we have can fit, because LTO6 and 7 hold the most on a single tape. We always want to keep multiple copies of each tape in different locations. Having a single tape is not enough, because what happens if that tape gets lost or damaged? So you want to make sure that you've got multiple copies of the same tape. You want to use software that is widely used. It has the greatest chance for long-term survival. So find out what other people are using and use the same software. And you also need to plan to actively manage your assets. And remember, when in doubt, preserve everything, because all it costs is tape. I want to thank our guest, Tim Jones, the President and CTO of TOLIS Group, Roger Mabon, co-founder and CEO of MLogic, and Dr. Mark Botchkis, Business Development Manager for ArchiWare. There's a lot of history in our industry, and it's all posted to our website at digitalproductionbuzz.com. And remember to sign up for our free weekly show newsletter that comes out every Friday. Talk with us on Twitter at DPBuzz and Facebook at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Our theme music is composed by Nathan Doogie Turner, with additional music provided by smartsound.com. Text transcripts are provided by Take One Transcription. Visit takeone.tv to learn how they can help you. Our supervising producer is Serena Catania. Our show producer is Debbie Price. Our production team is led by Brianna Murphy and includes Ed Golia and Keegan Guy. My name is Larry Jordan. Mike Horton will be back next week, as will Randy Altman. On behalf of all of us, thanks for joining us for the Digital Production Buzz.
The Digital Production Buzz was brought to you by Otherworld Computing, providing quality hardware solutions and extensive technical support to the worldwide computer industry since 1988. And by ImagineProducts.com, specializing in workflow applications for over 25 years.
If you'd like to see more videos like this one, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. To stay connected and receive updates from the BuZZ, sign up for our free weekly newsletter now. Or you can learn more about us on our website. And thanks for watching the Digital Production BuZZ.